Go ahead.
Greetings. It is such a delight and privilege to participate in this unprecedented virtual gathering of teachers, researchers, and advocates of STEM teacher education, among many others gathered. While we deeply regret that we're not able to meet in person, we are grateful for the opportunity to still engage with you and share some of our thoughts on funding opportunities to support the recruitment, preparation, and retention of teachers of color. I am Sandra Richardson. I am a program director in the Division of Undergraduate Education at the National Science Foundation, and I'm joined by my colleague, Nafisa Owens, who's also a program director and a staff associate at the National Science Foundation. In our brief presentation today, Nafisa and I will tell you a little bit more about our agency. We'll discuss some funding opportunities relevant to STEM teachers of color, and we'll conclude with sharing available resources that can be used as a means to mitigate barriers associated with supporting these teachers. As I reflect on the current moment in history, I'm reminded that every challenge is really just an opportunity. And as such, I'm reminded of the responsibility that we each have in reducing and alleviating inequities, injustice, or barriers in STEM teaching and learning. A lot of this work is what we do at NSF and we're deeply committed to. So I'll pass the baton now to Nafisa, who will share a little bit more with you about this work.
So first, we'd like to tell you a little bit more about the National Science Foundation. NSF is an independent federal agency created by Congress in 1950 with the intent to promote the progress of science, to advance the national health, prosperity, and wealth, and to secure the national defense. With an annual budget of $8.3 billion, NSF is the only federal agency whose mission includes support for all fields of fundamental science and engineering except for the medical sciences. An essential element for carrying out NSF's mission is support for science and engineering education, from pre-K through graduate school and beyond. The research we fund is thoroughly integrated with education to help ensure that there will always be plenty of skilled people available to work in new and emerging scientific, engineering, and technological fields, and plenty of capable teachers to educate the next generation. NSF is divided into 7 directorates that support science and engineering research and education, the Directorate for Education and Human Resources being one of them, and EHR is further divided into 4 divisions. While the Division of Human Resource Development in particular supports and promotes activities that seek to strengthen STEM education for underserved communities, to broaden their participation in the workforce, and to add to our knowledge base about programs of inclusion. That said, all of EHR's divisions have enhancing, broadening participation as a vital focus to our work. In total, EHR currently supports over 20 programs at the directorate, cross-directorate, and agency-wide level. We'll mention a few more of these programs a little later. Now we'd like to mention a little bit about diversity, equity, and inclusion as a federal priority. The federal government has an important role to play in furthering STEM education by working together at all levels and seeking to remove barriers to participation in STEM careers, especially for women and other underrepresented groups. To that end, in 2018, the National Science and Technology Council's Committee on STEM Education released a federal strategic plan for STEM education. This plan sets out a federal strategy based on a vision where all Americans have lifelong access to high-quality STEM education, and that the United States will be a global leader in STEM literacy, innovation, and employment. This vision is to be achieved by pursuing 3 aspirational goals. 1, building a strong foundation for STEM literacy. 2, by preparing the STEM workforce for the future. And 3, and finally, to increase diversity, equity, and inclusion in STEM.
To help us situate today's presentation It is important to ensure that we are all using the same meanings for terms that you'll hear frequently throughout the presentation. So please just join me in a very quick thought exercise. When you hear the words diversity, equity, inclusion, what immediately comes to mind? How do we define these terms? And why should we even value diversity, equity, inclusion when we think about teacher preparation, development, or retention? I ask that you pause to think more about this, but in the essence of time, I'll share the definitions that we will use. Diversity is the presence of difference within a setting. Dimensions of diversity can include race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, culture, and many other facets. Today, we'll focus primarily on ethnicity and race. Equity is an approach that ensures everyone access to the same opportunities, while recognizing that advantages and barriers do exist, and that equity and equality are not synonymous. Inclusion is about folks with different identities feeling valued and welcomed within a given setting. On the next slide, let's take a closer look at the demographics of the teacher workforce. What does diversity, equity, and inclusion look like in our teacher workforce? Next slide, Nafisa. We know from research that the student-teacher racial ethnic matching affects teachers' perceptions of students. Furthermore, research shows that students' academic performance, their self-worth, and behavior actually improve when they are in a classroom with teachers where there's a demographic match between the teacher and the student. Yet, while more than 50% of the K-12 student body in U.S. public schools is made up of individuals of color, we see in the graph on the screen with data from the Department of Education that the makeup of the U.S. teaching force has less than 20% of teachers who are individuals who identify themselves as African American, Latinx, Asian, Native American, or other non-white groups. So only 20% of teachers in the teacher workforce are teachers of color. Let's look at STEM, or science and mathematics in particular, teachers. When we look at the demographics of specifically science and mathematics teachers, the percent of teachers of color is even more dire. Using the most recent data from the National Survey of Science and Mathematics Education, we see that 91% of high school science and mathematics teachers are white. Likewise, between 88 and 89% of them at the elementary level are white, and 89 to 91% at the middle school level are white. This means that only around 10% of science or mathematics teachers across all grade levels are teachers of color. This does not account for the very small percent of multi-race teachers who may be double counted in the data in the graph you see on your screen. I'll also add that it's important to know while we see high numbers of attrition for all teachers across the board, teachers of color leave the teaching profession at higher rates. This tenuous state of diversity in America's teaching workforce has implications for the country's education overall, as well as for the growing number of students of color. So let's talk about how we can address these needs that we see in this data through looking at our EHR program. So briefly, we would like to highlight some funding opportunities within our directorate that has some impact on STEM teachers, with the focus being on STEM teachers of color. The first program that we want to look at is the Robert Noyes Teacher Scholarship Program. As the title suggests, this is a program with a focus on recruiting an adequate STEM teacher pool. Based on the statistics that we looked at a few slides ago, an adequate pool must include STEM teachers of color. The program provides funding to institutions to recruit, prepare, support, and help with the retention of STEM teachers. So as we have conversations about the shortage of teachers of color, programs like Noyes can actually directly impact an increase in the number of teachers of color in our nation's public schools. I'll add that Noyes also provides funding to support teacher leadership development and research studies on teacher effectiveness, persistence, and retention. I encourage any faculty in the audience from institutions of higher education to go to the Noyes website for additional information on applying for a Noyes grant. And I encourage all in the audience to go to the website for resources for both in-service and pre-service teachers.
The EASE program consists of 2 awards: the Presidential Awards for Excellence in Mathematics and Science Teaching, and the Presidential Awards for Excellence in Science, Mathematics, and Engineering Mentoring. Both awards NSF manages on behalf of the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. Established in 1983, the Presidential Awards for STEM Teaching is the highest honor bestowed by the government specifically for K-12 teaching. The president may recognize up to 108 teachers each year, while the Presidential Awards for STEM Mentoring recognizes the critical role that mentors play outside of the traditional classroom. And since 1995, this award has recognized individuals and organizations that have not only contributed to efforts in mentoring, but also have enhanced the participation of individuals who might not otherwise have considered or have had access to opportunities in STEM. EASE is not a grant program, but instead offers honorific cash awards of $10,000. Teachers may apply directly to either of these programs. Presidential awardees also receive a certificate signed by the president and are honored at an award ceremony each year. The last program that we'll mention is the NSF Includes Program. Include standing for Inclusion Across the Nation of Communities of Learners, Underrepresented Discoverers in Engineering and Science. This program is one of NSF's 10 big ideas, and it's an agency-wide initiative for investing in people and opening up educational and career avenues for those who historically, traditionally, have been underrepresented in STEM fields. Through NSF Includes, organizations work collaboratively to address broadening participation challenges at scale. This program also has a national network resource center that is open up to anyone interested in improving diversity and inclusion in STEM. And we encourage you to visit the national network to learn more. We'd now like to share some resources with you.
The first resource that we would like to share with you, all of them being free, is the STEM Teacher Leadership Network funded by NSF. This is a network of online professional learning for teacher leaders, researchers, and administrators. And we encourage you to go online and actually join the network to have discussions about teacher leaders affecting change in STEM education. There are frequent panels with as you can see on the screen, a recent one being a panel on equity in mathematics education. Another set of resources that we want to share with you are a series of videos and a video showcase that has hundreds of videos, many focusing on diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts in STEM teaching and learning. You can see a snapshot of some videos on the screen, but we encourage you again to go to this free website for additional resources. And then within our directorate, the EHR directorate, we have a host of blogs that we share with the community. Many of them are good for teachers as well as students and even parents. And so we encourage the community to think about all of these resources as we have these discussions about barriers for recruitment, retention, and preparation of STEM teachers of color. It's important to recognize that these resources are available.
The last resource we'd like to share with you is a list of STEM remote learning sites offered throughout the government. Recent events, we hope, will provide these as helpful. And we also would encourage you to click on the link to learn more about these links, as well as the STEM Education Advisory Panel, which also offers opportunities to learn more about efforts that are occurring across government in support of STEM education. And with that, we conclude our presentation. We thank you so much for joining us. Our contact information is on the first page. And again, thank you.
Thank you.